Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Jefferson County Public Utility District Number 1 Board of Commissioners. It is Thursday, May 19th, 2022, 9 a.m. And I'd like to begin first by determining that we have a quorum. I'm Kenneth Collins, Commissioner District 2 and Chair of the Board.
I am Jeff Randall, Commissioner for District 1.
Dan Toot for Commissioner for District 3.
So indeed, we have a quorum. Per the governor's extended proclamation 2028 and in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Jefferson County PUD is no longer providing an in-person room for meetings of the Board of Commissioners. All meetings will be held remotely via Zoom unless otherwise informed by the governor. Participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. If you're calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise your hand, indicating a desire to speak. Our next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda itself. And I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
I'll move that we accept the agenda and approve it.
I'll second the motion.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Our agenda has been approved. And we are here to discuss the Jefferson PUD broadband business plan. Will or Kevin, do you want to take it from here?
I'm going to start real quick and just thank Doug Dawson, the work he's done. We feel very fortunate that he's helping us on this. And Will, who's done us a fantastic job, not only getting grants, but putting so many things together behind the scenes. So thank you, everybody, and take it away.
Okay, I'm going to start the slideshow, and I'll begin with just a little background and then bring Doug in to go over some of the finer points of the business plan models that he developed for our programs. Just take me.
Commissioner Tupper, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question here of Kevin and Will and Doug. I looked at a lot of the questions that came in from the public, and I know we'll have some of the same questions. If we could early on kind of quantify and qualify the take rate, how we're going to determine that as you go through this. What is 100% take rate? What is the, as opposed to what is a 40% of that 100%? Kind of get that quantified for us as we get upfront, if we could.
We will get that early in the discussions of the business model.
And one thing I will ask a little bit. This is a very long presentation. There's a lot of information here. We're trying to get it assimilated to the board. And so a lot of questions may not be, or answers to the questions from the public may not be at the first, it may have to be the end. So we're trying to get through a lot, and it's primarily to get the board the information. So
Kevin, would you prefer that questions be held until the end of the presentation?
If a commissioner has questions, we should answer them at the time. I just don't want to spend a half hour and then get to the same question, 3 slides later. So if it's okay, we may just say, hey, we'll move on. That question will be answered in a couple slides, something like that, if that's permissible. Some discussion will be okay, and it may be easier with the presentation to do it at the time. But again, it's primarily for the board. So,
Commissioner Randall?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer that if there's something that it doesn't make sense or we don't understand what was just said, I think those are good questions to ask at the slide, but otherwise I think holding them until the end makes sense. And I just wanted to share that long list of questions that we got from JBAT made me want to call Karen Bennett and just kind of give her an overview of where I saw we were at with the whole effort. So Karen and I had a very nice conversation yesterday. So just wanted to share that I did give some response to those questions to Karen that hopefully she'll pass on as she sees appropriate.
All right. Mr. Dawson, are you ready to begin?
I think Doug's ready. I'm going to begin to start just
Okay.
an overview, and then Doug will kind of jump in. Ken and anybody else who's got some admin controls, I'll need some backup if there's any latecomer participants, if anybody's got chats or things like that. It'll be hard for me to do the presentation and manage that side of it. So help appreciated.
Got it.
Okay, so this presentation was put together by Doug and myself. I'm just going to go over a little broadband timeline where we've been to date. You know, in 2013, we received the BTOP grant that brought the first fiber to connect anchor institutions. We assumed ownership of the fiber, but that was a joint project with NOAANET. NOAANET got that grant. From that time to the present, our electrical division has been building out fiber for the SCADA network. We've also built up a wholesale business, selling wholesale access to our open access fiber. In 2017, 2018, we started to get a more serious look at how we can connect more residents in the county. The wholesale network that we have is all for business customers, and we have so many folks in our county who have no access to internet or have access to poor internet and have wanted us to help them with a solution. Our first kind of dipping our toes to 2017 to 2018. What we saw at that point is that we needed to have kind of a more intensive plan to figure out how we would expand our network because the costs were so great and the returns were unsure. We did that first plan using a CURB grant in 2019. We selected Magellan advisors. We had many community meetings. It's like we got to mute somebody. Got him. We had a great broadband symposium with Clallam County, and the JBAT was established at that meeting. In 2021, in 2020, we received a Public Works Board to look at a round 2 of strategic and business planning. The first model that we created, we couldn't quite figure out how to make it pencil out. So we wanted to do more in-depth analysis, and that's when we contracted with CCG Consulting and Doug Dawson and went over the business plan that was published in March. And the main results of that business plan were that it was going to be very difficult to not lose money on a broadband network build out to the residential communities unless there was a lot of federal grant aid and we were granted retail ISP powers. And in June 2021, the Washington State Legislature approved all PUDs and ports to serve as retail ISPs, and the first rounds of grants were announced. And we started applying for grants at that time, and then we received 3 grants between December and February of December 21, February of 2022. That's where we are to date. We're going to be looking at a model, the first model that kind of focuses on just the build out for those grant funded areas. The current PUD broadband team we don't have a full-time broadband staff member at this point. We've got a crew of folks who are all working on lots of different projects, and broadband is one of them. Kevin Street has done so much work, especially focusing on the network and overseeing construction. I've been more focused on the grants, the projects, and customer outreach. The fiber and equipment work has been done by our SCADA team, primarily Colton Worley and David Elias. And Eric Pryor is our new SCADA engineer. He's done a great job doing staking and quotes. Of course, I can't go by without mentioning Lori Ray, who was our kind of dedicated broadband employee till a month or two ago when she moved over to the engineering department, and Lori just did an amazing amount of work keeping our projects floating and managing our wholesale network. Because we've had the grants, we've started to kind of move forward with making plans. To date, we've received we received notice of award of 3 grants. We're still waiting to sign contracts on those 3 grants, and I'll get into what those grants are in a moment. But we're trying to position ourselves to be able to build out the network as quickly as possible once we have those contracts and once we know we can begin spending the money. We have spent some early funds that were designated in the grant for reimbursable, to be reimbursable before the project begins. The first partner that we have is CCG Consulting with Doug Dawson and his team, Daryl Duplichin. They've just been essential in helping us develop our strategy, do our planning, our preliminary engineering, project design, and grant development support. Doug has worked a lot with Finley Engineering. We did an RFP for design, engineering, and project management. Finley came in with the best bid, and they've just been fantastic to work with. We went through a long procurement process to figure out our network equipment vendor. We've chosen Calix. Calix will provide everything from the routers to the optical network terminals, the optical line terminals, the whole solution. And they've just been incredible with providing us support. And we've ordered our first few hundred of miles of cable from Genuine Cable, and we're going to be looking at another bid for fiber optic cable after this meeting. Okay. Come on, slides. So the overall goal that we're operating under is we want to facilitate access to broadband for all Jefferson County residents. And I'm going to stress the facilitate, and we're going to come into that in a second with our objectives. We want to extend our fiber network to all unserved customers in our electric service territory. Outside of our electric service territory, but within our county, we want to, and we have been partnering to assist to make those connections. We've partnered on the west end with the Ho Tribe and with NOAANet, and we've partnered with Mason PUD 1 and Hood Canal Communications to support their grant efforts to connect Brennan. Our first priority is to fund our construction with state and federal grants and loans, and we want to extend our existing network where financially viable. And of course, we want to build a future-proof, reliable, affordable network that will improve the quality of life of our customers and our residents. How the broadband department is set up today. Our broadband group is a department of the electric division. Historically, we've been wholesale and SCADA focused. We're moving towards retail now. So it'll be retail and wholesale ISP going forward. We are still open access fiber, and we want to be a fiber to the premises network. And NOAANet has been our current network operator. We want to transition more of those duties in-house. These are the current retail rates that the board approved last August. Our published rate, our base rate, or beginning rate for fiber to the home service, retail residential, is 100 by 100 megabits per second, symmetrical for $65 a month, and goes up from there with additional options. And then we've got the business rates, and starting with 100 by 100 and one gigabit per second by 1 gigabit per second. We also have some rates for, we're doing some custom rates for dedicated service and multi-tenant service, and we're working on those as well. We've got our wholesale rates that we passed last year as well, updated after a few years. The fiber construction projects. This is going to be the basis for our grant discussion, and this was the Doug used all of the details from our grant applications that we've developed to create the business models. And this is a great pick that Scott Bancroft took of a fiber plow going from the BPA substation where we've recently connected to, we've leased BPA transmission fiber, providing another path off of the peninsula. So our current projects, this is to the left is a map that we now have, interactive map we have on our website that shows the projects that we have either received funding for or are currently in development. As I said, that's the basis for our business models today. The Olympic Fiber Corridor, that's from Quilcene to Gardner, that's in purple. That one has been funded through a partnership with the NTIA, the federal NTIA, and the Washington State Broadband Office. East Discovery Bay catches that little bit between Anderson Lake Road and Highway 20, where there's almost no service. That was funded by the Public Works Board. Jefferson North is our kind of greater Cape George area, Woodland Hills and Marrowstone Island. Those three have all been funded. Southeast Jefferson County is in development now. We're looking at applying for either a state broadband office grant or a reconnect grant. That one would extend from Chimacum to Ludlow to Coyle. Sorry about that. This map doesn't show the Ludlow area connections. We've got to add those back in. The PT Business Fiber, that's a loan project that we submitted for funding for through the Public Works Board last month or early this month. I can't keep track of time anymore. It looks like we have a raised hand, Jeff or Ken. I'm not sure if you want to take questions now. Oh.
It's up to you. I know it's a long presentation. I think we can maybe take a couple of quick questions.
I was scratching my head, no hand up.
Okay, great.
So my question was this, Will, on that map in the future, is there a chance that you can kind of color in the RDOF areas too? That I think that would be helpful in the future because there's a lot of areas there. It looks like we're not going to do anything, and there's reasons why in some areas we can't do it. So at present, so if it would be helpful maybe to highlight where the RDOF areas are in this map too.
Yeah, we can produce some other maps with the RDOF in there. It'll kind of turn it into Swiss cheese, and it'll make it really hard to see what the project areas are. But we can provide those maps to the board and to the public in another meeting.
Mr. Boyd, you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the map here, and I'm looking, and some of these areas that are highlighted are already built. I mean, I'm wondering, some of these already have fiber to the home, and some of them have other services that exceed the broadband speed requirements. I mean, Center, we've been building Center. You know, you've got two different fiber providers on Marrowstone Island. Why is the PUD spending grant money in those areas?
So some of these questions like that, Leo, we'll wait till we get towards the end. We'll see a lot more information, a lot more stuff coming up. As with the some of the other grants, there are some pockets in there that are served, but it's very spotty to maybe one person being served and the next one not. So, but we'll get into that in more detail. That question will be answered hopefully by the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, and what I would add is we surveyed these areas pretty extensively and got speed tests. So it's to my knowledge, except for the Port Townsend fiber area, which is only for businesses, these are all areas that mostly have access to DSL. On Marrowstone, those fiber connections a lot of them are on the PUD's network. So it's connected off of our network. So we don't see that as competing, but I'll keep going. Okay. So this is just an overview of what we've got going today, the different grant programs, and the ones in bold are the ones that we received funding for. The two that are non-bold are ones that are in the application stage. This is the the question of the take rate. The top line is the residential passings, how many households we go past, and then the business passings, and then the customers we expect to serve based on the take rate presented. So 70% is what we're estimating for the East Discovery Bay area. We have a higher take rate for that area because it's a smaller area. We feel we'll be more successful in making sure we can get everybody a higher percentage of residents connected within the grant period. And then we have down to 60% in some of those larger areas. And Doug has a great point about this if you want to speak to
Yeah,
it.
let me jump in here. These are not what we predict to be the ultimate final take rates, because 5 or 10 years from now, you may be at 70, 80, 90%. These grants all have a timeline. They have to be finished in 2 years or 3 years. And so what we're predicting here is the number of people we can get connected before the end of the grant. The fact is, in a lot of these areas, we won't even hit these numbers. Well, if we get to 55% on the last day of the grant cycle, we just don't get the other 5%. When that date comes, they don't give us any more money. And so we think this is sufficient. Even when people want fiber, a lot of them are just not going to be able to make that switch in time. That happens in every single place I work with. I've got 600 clients with fiber. Some people have contracts. A million reasons why they're not ready to quite go now. Remember, in some of these 2-year grants, it'll take most of that time to do the construction. So we don't have that much time left at the end of that 2 years to actually get the people connected. And so the chances are, in almost every one of these, we may not even quite hit these numbers, but we're not predicting that, or in the long run, that we won't do better than this. It's just, this is what the grants are going to fund. So.
Oh, sorry about that. I got to move everybody around so I can see what I'm doing here. They turned the power off to my office, so I'm working out of a remote location, so it's a little bit funky, so forgive me. Let's see here. So moving down through, we see the miles of fiber per grant area, and then the cost or the awards from the state or the federal agency, and then the match that was obtained, and then the cash that we're going to have to put in. So the total funding for all these projects, all these grant funded projects that we're developing, is about $40 million, of which we're going to be putting in $1.3 million of our own funds. Okay. So now we're going to move on to the models. We've got 2 models that we put together. We're going to start with the state and federal funded unserved areas that are on that map. And this does include the RDOF areas that are within, and we'll go over that a little bit. And then we've got a second model that has those same areas plus some immediately adjacent customers. So for our first model, we're assuming a total of 2,573 retail customers, 335 open access. This is again, we went over this 36 million in grant funding, 1.8 low interest loan, 1.3 matching funds from the PUD. This does include the annual property tax in the revenue, or exactly where we put it, and assumes a $750 connection fee per non-grant eligible customer. So if anyone's in the RDOF area, or if anybody comes in after the grant period is closed.
And this is probably a good time to explain the RDOF in plain English to everybody. And so there was an FCC program in 2020 where ISPs can come and bid to get, it's not really grants, they're long-term 10-year subsidies to build broadband in certain areas. And in the county, there were some tiny areas won by CenturyLink, but most of the FCC awards went to Starlink, the satellite company. And so we can't use any other federal money to overbuild those areas. And so now there's a really good chance that Starlink is not going to get that award. The FCC has not made the award yet. It's been 1.5 years, and they're still very controversial. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but the NTIA just came out with rules for the $45 billion grant program that's coming up. And in those rules, they declared that satellite is not broadband. And so that kind of has given us a hint that the federal agencies are deciding that satellite shouldn't count for these grants. We don't know for sure, but there's a good chance that Starlink won't get that money. And then all of a sudden those areas are open to us. Now, what you're going to see in the business plan is there's nothing to stop you from building to those with your own money. You just can't use these grant dollars. And so, these areas are crazy. One side of the street's the grant area, the other side of the street's the RDOF area. Well, you're not going to, as a PUD, you're not going to hook up the people on one side of the street and tell the people on the other side of the street they can't have it. But we can't use one penny of grant money to get those people hooked up. So it's a very odd thing. And it's one reason that those service areas look so crazy, because they sort of surround these award areas. And so it really is. Swiss cheese was a great word that he used to do it. But I think in the long run, you're going to build most of those areas. It's just, and you may even get grants to do it if Starlink falls through. And that would be one of the next grants that we go after. But so, it does complicate things. It's not, if those didn't exist, we would have gone for grants for that whole center of the county. We wouldn't have had that weird looking service areas. So back to you, Will.
Commissioner Tupper.
So I'm aware that there's going to be another round of that RDOF money let out. And let's go on the assumption that Starlink doesn't or isn't able to access those funds in those areas, but another large carrier could, and hope that they did the right thing, which is try to get this service to customers in those areas. How does that affect our take rates and our ultimate ability to, expand our business model to capture those customers?
Well, first off, the second round of right now, there's a $45 billion grant program for straight out grants. And that's called the BEAD grants. And they're going to start sometime next year, probably near the end of the year. That's going to come first. That second round of RDOF is quite off in the future. And so, that's not going to happen for a while. The chances are Starlink is going to either be given that money or not given that money before the end of this year, is everyone's expectation. At that point, we can go after state grants, we could go after reconnect grants, we could go after these upcoming big grants. You certainly could go after that money yourself. So, somebody else could always go after those monies as well, but it's not likely going to be another RDOF. Because I think all these other grants will probably fund those areas long before they get around to another one of those. But the fact is, if Starlink falls through, you alone have 3 or 4 different options to get it funded, and we'll certainly be trying to do that. So.
And we have put in the time to do the mapping to know where everybody is, because it was quite the job to get through the NTIA application process. We had to know to the square inch where the RDOF locations were.
Yeah, so if those grants come up, we're ready to go get them. You bet. So.
Okay. So just an overview of the revenues of expenses. Orange is the expenses, gross revenues. This cash flows after the third year, starting in 2025. We are cash positive with total revenues approaching $2,750,000 by 2031. I included
before you go on, Will.
Sure. Yeah.
I want to point out how the revenues flatten out. This entire model is very conservative. As those expenses keep creeping up, we're going to raise the rates. The blue lines would go up from rate increases. There's no reason you would let the expenses catch up to the revenues. All the other PUDs raise their rates every 1 or 2 years. So you would do the same. So the long-term picture, when you look out at 28, 29, 30 is better than this. This is very conservative. So.
Yeah. And also this assumes not a lot of, it's exponential customer growth rate in the early years with the grant construction, and then it's a very slow growth rate after that.
Right.
So if we were to expand to other parts of the county, this does not include that expansion in this model. Dan, did you have a question?
Do these revenue forecasts take into account the current rate of inflation if it were not to subside and stay at its current level for 3, 4, 5 years, and the supply chain issues and cost of materials and stuff like that, labor? Does it take those things into account?
All models that we're doing in the whole industry assume that if inflation doesn't stop, that we'll have to raise rates to make that work. So the answer is you can always raise rates to catch up to revenues. And every other ISP is going to be doing that. AT&T just had a $5 rate increase. Charter just had one. Comcast just had one. The fact is, inflation makes you raise the rates, and so it's going to go up for everybody. Wave will raise their rates. You will raise your rates. CenturyLink will raise their rates, and so if inflation doesn't stop, that's just what's going to happen to the entire industry, not just to you. The supply chain issue is harder in that, we've predicted a timeline here, and our timeline is predicted when the grants say we have to spend the money. Most of these grants would allow us to add another year on if things get dire in the supply chain. So if that happens, the revenues could be slightly delayed because the materials would be delayed. But the good news is, it's 400 miles of fiber. We're certainly not going to take 4 years to get all that fiber. And we know once these grants are awarded, we're going to start ordering it now. So if it held you up, it would be right at the beginning. It will not be holding you up in 24 and 25 because we're going to order that stuff in 22 and 3. So, even if it takes 2 years to get here, we'll have it. So I think that's, beauty of these grants is we now know that we can absolutely be funded, so we can start ordering. So.
Okay. I just included the revenue and expenses, the entire table, so everyone can see. I don't know, Doug, if you want to go over any little bit of this, but it'll be in the presentation that we'll post online for folks to review.
Yeah, what you see here is most of the revenue is broadband revenue. That's the retail broadband revenue. There's also wholesale broadband revenue, meaning open access. We do have a telephone product that's resold voice over IP. You can see how tiny that is compared to the other numbers, but there are folks who are going to want it. And that's particularly attractive to businesses, actually. They still have their phones in their stores. And so, that's where a lot of that comes from, but it's not a big number. Tiny little miscellaneous revenues, which almost don't matter. And also a tiny bit of current revenues that we just kept the same along here. That would all fold in as what will happen. It won't really stay as a separate line item. The expenses are just, those are now at this point, I did a presentation for you, a year and a half ago of the first business plan. At that time we were kind of guessing. These are pretty, these are now budgetary. The PUD is going to turn around at some point year by year and give you budgets. And, these now have a lot of thought in between all the expenses. We now know the people that want to be hired. We have salaries for them. We know how many vehicles there will be, and just, all that kind of detail that we did not have a year and a half ago. So, I have good confidence, other than inflation, that the expenses are pretty solid. We do have 3% inflation in here. If it long term, if it turns out to be more than that, then these numbers would go up at the bottom, but then the numbers would go up the top to keep us whole. So, what I don't want to do is build a 7 or 8% inflation model, and because the numbers get crazy if they don't materialize. We like to be conservative, knowing that you can always make it work. Every ISP is not going to go bankrupt because of inflation. So.
So it's just let's see if I can. Okay. Libby, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, I can't seem to get you muted. Oh, we're back. Okay, so this is the yearly versus the cumulative EBITDA. This is the cash, the cash that we're going to be generating, and then it shows the blue bar showing yearly accumulation or yearly generation, and the green showing the accumulation over time. So it paints a pretty good picture. We do see, again, because of that lack of growth and the increasing depreciation we see in the yearly, the amount going down a little bit over time. I would hope we would be finding a way to expand well before that happens.
Well, and that's the inflation. That's the not raising rates issue. If you want to go back to the prior slide once.
Sure.
Cash is EBITDA basically means revenues minus expenses. So, real cash out the door revenues minus real cash out the door expenses. And so, you know, that number, do you have that on here? You didn't go the rest of the way on this chart. You don't have EBITDA on here.
No, I don't have that one.
It would
John.
be the revenues at the top minus the expenses at the bottom, except for depreciation, which is it's not a cash expense. And so this thing does have positive cash generated starting by 2024, which is all by itself. That's extraordinary. Startup ISPs do not get cash positive that quickly. And the reason you do is because of the grants. I mean, I have to be honest, if the day you hired me, Will said to me, oh, we'll get 40 million, you know, out of a $40 million project, we'll only have to put in $1 million. I would have told you were crazy. But you guys have actually pulled it off. I mean, you're funding almost all of this project out of grants, which is extraordinary. I've never seen anyone get that high of a percentage of grant compared to matching. So that's what makes this work is the, you know, the state and the feds are paying for all this. So.
Okay, so model 2, this includes the funded unserved areas.
Excuse me, Will, could you go back to the previous slide and tell me again, the green bar represents?
The cumulative.
Okay, thank you. That's all I needed.
Yep.
Yeah, they're the same number. Green just adds up to the blue one. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Got
then
it.
actually the cash per year is shown below. And it shows how it grows over time.
Oh, there's EBITDA. Yeah.
Yep,
You can
right
see
down.
so, you know, starting 2025, you're clearing 300,000 of cash. So.
Okay, model 2, this is the same model we used before, plus immediately adjacent areas to those grant projects. And it assumes another 1,850 customers.
Let me pause you
go
for
ahead.
one more second.
Go ahead.
The
Yep.
first one actually includes 200 and some people in the RDOF areas, those people who are across the street.
Yep.
So we're saying, look, we're going to hook them up right away. So they're actually in that first model. So, so just to remind you. So.
Yeah, and I didn't make that distinction because they're within the grant area. It's just confusing. So 1850 directly adjacent, and then we'd be using our own revenues generated by the program to cover those connections. So this would see a total of 4,214 retail customers, 514 open access, the same amount of grant funding and loans, inclusion of the property tax, and assuming the same connection fee. And I should have said in the first model, we had 6.5 employees within the first 5 years. And then in this model, it's an additional 1 employee.
And again, to sort of, you know, say that this really uses your own money without any more borrowing to add another 1,800, you know, passings, which is, you know, so this now, of course, if at that rate, if you wanted to do the whole county this way, this is a 20-year project, but you know, so the amount we're generating is not enough to build everywhere out of project revenues, but these grant areas alone will pay for another almost 2,000 people to get on the network. So that money comes strictly from them. So.
Yeah, and you can see, so getting up to 4,000 customers over that 10-year period, we're going to be, it'll increase our revenues to almost 4,200, or not, sorry, 4,200,000 per year. And again, exceeding expenses. And you can see the EBITDA for this one. The cumulative EBITDA is a sharper line going upwards. And then instead of that sag off, we have a continued increase.
Yeah, and what we do here is that EBITDA line, which is cash actually generated, we turn right around and build with it. So I mean, that's why we get the 1,800 customers. So you know, in 2028, you make 600,000 of actual cash, and then we turn around and connect 600,000 of customers with it. That's what this model does. So,
Commissioner Tupper.
So refresh me a little bit now, if I'm reading all these numbers right, that these assumptions and numbers are all being calculated with us borrowing 1.8 million to do the Port Townsend project. That would be the only debt we would take on to make these numbers come out?
yes, sir. And that debt is at some ridiculously low interest rate. Was it 0.4% or something? So
Yep. over
So
50
if all of these numbers pan out, I think that means that Commissioner Tupper will finally get decent broadband.
years.
It depends on which side of the street we can go to, maybe. That's just some of the nuances. I think that we need to let people understand is that, there are some places that we may not get to, even within the areas. That's my opinion.
Oh, there absolutely is. And so the good news is that stuff's going to get resolved here as this year goes on. And then there will be other grants. If it turns out that those become available to you, we'll instantly pursue getting them. So, but these grants alone do not get everyone, that's for sure. So.
And we can get to the other side of the street. There just may be an additional charge. That will be the rub of it. Okay.
It's
So there's
good
just-
price the customers, which could price the customers out of being able to utilize the service.
Yep, that could be the case. And we have some options we can talk about later. But we would like to see some programs to do some financing, on-bill financing, but we'll talk about that another time. So this is just comparing the EBITDA and the returns for the first model versus the second model, the sharper, the green. Looks like I cut off the legend, but the green and the blue lines are from the 4,000 customers in Model 2, and the yellow and the gray are from Model 1. And you can see adding more customers means more returns, more opportunities. Okay.
And to explain that, fiber business is strictly an economy of scale business. The bigger you get, the more profit you make per customer, because those 6.5 people, as he said, to add another 2,000 people, we only had one more employee. So the margin per customer gets bigger as you grow. And so it gets more and more and more profitable over time, which is, which is great. I mean, as we get to the whole county, this becomes way, way more profitable. So.
Okay. The financial conclusions. This is the fiber we've already purchased through our first order from Genuine Cable in preparation for the NTIA grant. That's in our yard now. So we will be cash flow positive after 3 years. In Model 2, we've got 4 million plus in annual revenue, 4,000 customers within 10 years. And then we're adding 30 million in equity to our electric department for 1.3 million cash outlay from our reserves. So it's that's when Doug went over the numbers with Kevin and I initially, we were pretty pleased. We knew this would work out based on our last business planning round, when we knew that if we could get the grants and get the retail ISP ability, that would greatly improve our chances of making it cash positive. And we feel pretty strongly that these models bear that out.
Hey, Will,
Yep.
just go over that slide one more time, would you please? Just one more time on this slide.
So with these models, in both models, we're going to be cash flow positive after 3 years. We're going to be generating positive cash flow every year after 3 years. In the second model, we're up to 4 million in annual revenue and 4,000 customers added over 10 years. And that's a lot of customers that right now either don't have service or have really poor service, and they pay a lot of money for it. And they've been, as all of you know, we've been getting so many requests for help, and it's going to be really exciting to start serving those people. And then we're adding 30 million in equity to our electric department for a 1.3 million cash outlay from our reserves. So that's an incredible return on value and increasing the value of our PUD.
And that equity increases the PUD's overall borrowing capability. That makes you a much stronger company. That's 30 million of real equity. That's a big number. So
it's just put in the balance sheet. That shows some of the equity. Doug, I don't know if you have any more to say on this one.
The one thing to mention is he mentioned in an earlier slide, but I mean, these numbers just get bigger because there's more customers. And we don't really start adding the extra customers till after a few years. We still take care of grant people first. So, until we get that positive cash, I mean, the 22, 3, and 4 numbers are the same between the two slides, or they should be. So we start adding those other people out here later. The thing to remember is we're asking people not in the grant areas to pay $750 to join the network. I mean, the cost to add customers is going to be between $3,500 and $4,000 each. And so the thought was that, they're going to need to pay something that to do that actually gets you a lot more customers at it. There are ways that you might be able to spread that over time so it's hardly noticeable to people. And that's, so we're working on some ideas like that. It would not be they don't have to write a check on day one. But there has to be some kind of fee to get in there, unless you guys want to waive it and put more money in. Of course, that's your prerogative as the board. But for now, that's the number we came up with. It's not cast in concrete. I don't think Kevin's made you a formal proposal on it yet, but that's what we have in here. So,
Commissioner Tupper.
What kind of contract commitment would go along with that $750 fee?
we haven't gotten that far. So I would think that anyone, if they get to spread it over time, they're going to have to guarantee to take service. That's what I would do if I was the ISP. So
Yeah, currently there's
because you basically said that you're saying that the 750 isn't really the true cost, that's going to be borne out over the larger group. So I would, again, if you're going to do that, your contract would have to take into account that, that you're already kind of subsidizing that 7.
Yes, sir. If I was an ISP, I would have those kind of requirements. Yep.
Okay, so we're just going to go briefly. I don't have a fully detailed marketing plan, but I can tell you what we've been doing, what we're going to keep doing, and we've been really successful. You can see one of the postcards out to the side. That was for our Discovery Bay project. We sent postcards and a survey to every resident in that area. We did the same for the Jefferson North we did the same for the Quilcene to Gardner area. And then we just sent out postcards for the Southeast Jefferson County project on Monday, and they're already stacking up the return replies. So we're going to do a mix of all marketing channels. We're going to be sending direct mail. We're going to be sending direct emails. Social media advertising, we've done a bunch of. We'll continue to do that. We've got the largest distribution of any newsletter or newspaper in the county with our PUD newsletter that goes to over 15,000 homes. The local newspapers can only go up to 6. We'll continue to do press releases, paid print ads, more postcard updates, more direct email updates, direct phone calls. I'm answering customer calls every day. So is the customer service department. We've got our website with some bare bones stuff we got to do. And as we move to becoming a retail ISP, we're going to have more of a retail ISP section of the website that will be under development this summer. Continue to do earned media like we had with Crosscut and other outlets. When we do construction, we'll have door hangers, in-person events, and we've got funding for all of this. Commissioner Collins.
What are the plans for increasing customer service personnel to deal with this?
So we have two customer service personnel budgeted in both of the models. One starting, I think, next year, and then one coming in after that. So that would be the plan. And the marketing, is going to be a lot of that work will be on myself and then our new digital communication specialist, Jameson Hahn, who started beginning of the month. Okay. Timeline. I would love to have presented a more detailed timeline. We still don't have a single contract for our grants. This is a little bit of a sticking point. I'm hoping that we'll be able to get a finalized contract with the Public Works Board next week. But I still don't have a timeline for when I'll get a contract from the State Broadband Office on our NTIA grant or on our Infrastructure Acceleration Grant, which is the Jefferson North project. But we're in touch at least once a week or more. So I will update you as soon as I know. Right now, March to May, we've been working on contracts, ordering and planning. May to August, we're going to develop a customer registration process so that people can sign up for the service, at least initially. We've gotten so much feedback through the postcards and our email outreach. We're just going to have another layer so we can make sure that they're on board to get the service when it becomes available. We're setting up our inventory and we're doing hiring. We currently are interviewing for a network engineer, and we are looking at other arrangements for staffing the department. October to December, if we're awarded the Public Works Board loan, we would be able to begin some construction in Port Townsend, and we think we'll be able to start building in Discovery Bay using that Public Works Board grant. And then we begin installing our network equipment and building out our network infrastructure. And I'll take questions. I know Commissioner Randall had his hand raised.
Yeah, Will, I was going to ask if the time that it's taking to get contracts executed with the agencies, at this point, is there any concern that that delay that's being caused could create a problem for us in complying with the actual construction deadlines? Is there any, is it getting that, is the delay creating those kinds of concerns yet, or when might it?
There's no concerns on my end. It just, it's just that we promised people we're going to be building to them, and I keep having to push it back. That's my real concern. The NTIA, I met with them, the NTIA and the state broadband office. They've assured everyone that they will allow for a extension of the grant deadline. They want everybody just to do it at one time. So I think we're fine with that. And as far as I know, I think it's more of finalizing the federal rules for how the funding is used that they're waiting for before they can do the disbursements and give us the contracts. But
Okay, so it's just delaying the start date, basically.
yeah, it just is
Okay.
delaying the start date. Yeah, and it is worrisome. But we've been very proactive. We did our first initial order of fiber. We did our RFPs to select our engineer. We did the RFP to select our equipment vendor. We met with the equipment vendor yesterday. We're going to do a small purchase up front and then delay our big grant order until we're sure we have those contracts. But just so we can keep moving forward, because we want, not only do we want to meet the grant deadlines, people are excited about the service. People want the service. People need the service. So we want to get it to them as soon as we can.
Well,
And this is a little bit of a side note, but a little piece of the problem is that the top two people in the Washington grant office left, and that never helps them pushing these things out either. I mean, those kind of things just happen. The money is coming for sure. I mean, these are not at all doubtful. So,
Yep.
I would like to say, Jeff, I'm going to take a little different approach. We have not hired some people kind of waiting. So I do think it is costing us, because we've been very, very conservative, bringing people on and doing certain things till, we've been awarded, but until you sign the contract, there's a lot of things going on. It has affected us in a negative way, not having those contracts signed, specifically personnel and equipment.
So beginning in January of 2022, we'll start doing our initial connections, fiber to the home, fiber to businesses, and we'll begin our.
Hey, Will?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Commissioner Tupper has his hand up too.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see that. Thank you.
So I'm going to take a little bit different angle here, and that is on the Public Works Board loan. Now, do we have commitments from the businesses in that project area to guarantee that they, my opinion is this should be user oriented. Whoever's using that service in that project should cover the cost of that loan. That should not be spread out amongst everybody in the county that, is going to get broadband from us. So do we have commitments to go after that loan?
We have from our survey that we did, which was a quick survey to meet the deadline. I think we had 55 positive responses that people wanted the service out of a total of 200 and some potential customers, but we have three years to hook them all up. And if we don't hook them all up, we won't use all of the funding. So we wouldn't be on the hook for the full amount. And that loan, we would be requiring a construction fee of $1,200 for all the customers connected, that they could either pay up front and have no contract, or they could finance over time.
And
that
how
would,
many businesses or customers was that expected to be?
I'd have to go back and look, but it was over 200.
Yeah, 275 is what I believe the total grant was for. Yep.
And Dan,
So-
we're
so-
looking at a postage stamp model, very similar to what we do in water and in electric, so that the cost will be spread across the users of the product, not just a single home. So it will be a postage stamp rate that everyone pays the same rate. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I think it's important for the public to understand that those 200 businesses will not bear the cost of repaying that loan if they, if we can't meet the revenues or returns in that area, that everybody in the system will cover that 1.8 million. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, it is the same thing, for example, in the water side and the electric side. Yes, it will be exactly the same, where revenues come back to fund growth.
Yeah, and the purpose of that loan, why we pursued it and did it in that relatively quick fashion, is because we have so much interest in connecting to our fiber, and the quotes just vary so much. We just did two in the vicinity of Otto Street, where both relatively the same distance as the crow flies from our building. One was 2,000, one was 15,000. And it just depends on the routing and the number of other factors. And we come across that all the time in Port Townsend, where people will want to connect. But like I said, 2,000 is maybe conceivable for some businesses, 15 is pretty hard. But if we're building to the whole area, that brings down our costs, and that enables us to do some averaging. But again, if we don't have 275 connections, if we have substantially less, then we won't be borrowing all of the 1.8 million. That's the entire, estimate for the entire project. Commissioner Randall.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is we have this desire to have improved service in the business areas in Port Townsend, but without this loan, we would be looking at spending our own money, which we don't necessarily have a chunk of cash like that to spend our own money. And to get a customer to sign up for it, there's a certain percentage that you can expect to get from them up front, which I'm hearing you say is about $1,200, that we think, okay, we think they'll make the decision to do that, and the rest of it we'll get back over time. And what I'm hearing also is that unless you're prepared to serve everybody, you can't necessarily deal with the maximum number of people that want to do it. And if we hadn't borrowed the money, we wouldn't really able to serve any of them very well. So it sounds like a pretty conservative approach we've taken. If it's a low interest rate, we're going to spend it as people actually request the service. They're going to be paying for a portion of it up front, and the rest over time we'll get from the fees they pay monthly. So it seems like we're not going crazy, but it gives us a plan to actually serve the area that otherwise we just wouldn't be able to do it. And we'd just be kind of stuck where we are now with not great service.
I'd also point out that, the rates are higher for businesses, so they pay back faster. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a minimum gig connection for that loan project, and the revenues pay for it over time, which is a 15-year loan. And that is we have only applied for that. We have not received it. We hope we have a good shot, but we do not know for sure. Okay, moving on to January to August, we've got to finish up the Quilcene to Gardner and the Discovery Bay grants first. So those will be our first area of construction. Moving into July of 2023 in December, we hope to start doing, in the second half of the year, hope to start doing the connections to the home, and then we hope to start the Jefferson North construction. We're still in the process developing our application for Southeast Jefferson County. I think we're probably going to end up going through the Reconnect grant. That doesn't open till August. I just met with the USDA today. We're going to be working hand in hand with them to do that application. There's also an opportunity for us to take a second bite at the apple through the state broadband office. But all the things that gave us an advantage last time, they just took away for the next funding round. So it'll be much more competitive. We'll still kind of do our due diligence to see which route we go. 2025, 2026, we'll be continuing our connections. And then that's when we'll be building the Southeast Jefferson County fiber construction and those connections. So all of our
and that's also when we're adding a lot of those 1,850 extra places on too, right?
Yep. Yeah. So the bulk of our connections will all take place in the first year. And all of our first 5 years, and all of our grant work should be done within those first 5 years. Timeline 5 to 10 is not quite as exciting. We'll be hooking up those adjacent area connections, and then hopefully we're going to be doing some more business planning for how we expand our network beyond that initial construction area. And that's how we'll continue. We did not bring together any models for building out beyond that. We feel we have enough work to do with our existing projects for the next few years. And I think some solutions for expanding out beyond will become self-evident. More funding opportunities will arise, and we'll actually have the service in the community, which will create new opportunities. Doug, do you want to add into that?
Yeah, there's going to be grant money to build to every home that has service less than 120, 100 down, 20 up. And so there will be more grant funding on top of those 5 grants on the list. So, I mean, I say right now, it's raining grant money. It's amazing how many grants are out there. So those 5 grants are not the end of the story. So, yeah,
the 100 to 20 area, we will get more pushback from the incumbents. So that's kind of, we've been lucky because these have all been 25-3. So we're building the DSL areas, and the CenturyLink has not protested, and Astound hasn't protested as well. They've all had the opportunity for every grant we've done. Okay. Now we're just kind of moving on to wrap this up. We were hoping to have policy updates today. We've completed revisions to all of our policies, and we have our internet service agreement for doing our retail ISP policies. But Joel was not able to attend this meeting, so we're going to put those off to the June 7th meeting, and we will provide all of those in advance. They are all complete. And then we're just at questions. And I'm happy to go back to any slide.
can we do Kevin's slide 2 or 3 more times?
Commissioner Tupper, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, so again, for the public's benefit, what's going on around the country and in this state is geared at getting internet to people who don't have it, or is unlikely they can get it due to several reasons, most of which, or highest of which, is the cost of getting it to them. As we look at this today, that's why I brought up the loan and the business part of this model, working on that. And we're going to have people who they're going to look at the grant money and think, well, where did all the grant money go? And I still don't have internet, right? So I think we need to not lose our focus that those underserved areas should really be the primary focus. And we need to get the public to understand, some of these other things we're doing, why that's going to be done. And they still, the grant money could run out before we get to them. I think we need to have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, the 23 million we've been awarded to date is all for those unserved residents. So the numbers beyond that, we really want to find ways. We will be able to connect them. And at this point, we are projecting a cost, and we want to find ways to mitigate that cost. On top of all of that, for the monthly charge, we're starting as a base of $65 a month. We've got a low-income program that gives a $20 discount, and will be part of the Affordable Community program, or Affordable Connection Pro. I can't remember the acronym. So that'll be an additional $30 that discount that'll be available to low income customers. So it will be highly affordable for many people. Other questions? I cannot see hands. Ken, if you could help out.
Yeah, Leo Boyd has the hand up.
Right. So back to the coverage map you're talking about to build. And the question was about Marrowstone and Center and the other areas like Brennan and Gardner that we already service.
We're not serving Brennan. Gardner, from my understanding, is that there's not much service there. I understand that you have some connections there, Leo. We're happy to work with you on those, but there's a lot of unconnected folks out there.
Well, I mean, I can't control who wants to hook up with me or not, but I mean, doesn't mean it's not available to them. Same with Marrowstone Island, you know, you say, well, all these people are saying that they have access to it. They're choosing not to hook up.
Right. So they have, the other part of this is that we're using the grant funding, we're building to them at no construction cost to the end user. So anyone potentially could be connected if they want to pay enough of the construction costs. So this for this grant area, it's allowing us to do, you know, what Wave or CenturyLink would do, which was just provide the service and receive the revenue for that from rates.
Well, and I'd like to address his question he asked at the beginning. These grants, for example, if there's customers there served already off of the PUD fiber, these grants don't cover those. They simply skip right over them. I mean, we had to purposefully exclude those kind of locations from the grant application. And so those maps make it look like it's everybody in there, but there are exceptions for folks who already are served. The grants do not cover them. So
yeah,
well, I mean, they're not exclusively delivered over the PUD fiber. So we use the PUD's fiber as our upstream backhaul. So, but the actual plant itself, the OSP, belongs to us. We built it. We own it. I mean, if you go and you say, you know, like earlier was said that, you know, well, we consider it ours because, you know, you get your service from us. That's like saying that CenturyLink, no, you don't have your own service. Your service, you know, without CenturyLink, you wouldn't get off this peninsula. So, you know, really, your service is CenturyLink.
As a Marrowstone Island resident and being very familiar with the island and the history here, it is true that there are residents who do now have fiber to the home and have high quality service. But I would say easily 80% of the island does not have access to fiber service. They have some service, but they're lucky if it begins to approach 25.3. In most instances, people are on the double twisted copper lines from CenturyLink. And unless you're right next to the D-SLAM, you're getting very spotty service.
So I think realistically, the only, you know, up where you're located, yes. Up by Fort Flagler, right past CenturyLink/remote, yeah, that's a tough area. But everything before that, East Marrowstone Road, Schwartz Road, everything back, their equipment is spaced to where they can easily do more than 25.3. I mean, I have customers that are on Flagler Road or Griffith Point Road that are doing 100 meg service over DSL.
And we've cut out some of those areas.
And there's also, these grants allow a certain small percentage of the grants to go to people who have faster than 25.3, as long as it's slower than 120. So it's not only 25.3, but it's mostly 25.3. So they each of them does, some of them, they do allow some, you know, filling in the gap of DSL folks who are somewhere between 25 and 100. they certainly do not want you to overbuild anyone who's got 100. So
Right. I mean, in Center Road, we're out center building too. And we actually have customers turned up out in Egg and I Center, out there, fiber to the home. So, anyways. And then my other question was, so at this point, how many retail customers does the PUD have?
We don't have any retail customers yet.
Commissioner Tupper, you have a question?
Yeah, a couple questions. I'm gonna circle back to what I started out the day with, and that is the take rate. We have 20,000 electric customers in our service area, and we're projecting we'll have 4,000 of those customers as taking an ISP service from us. What is the real number, though, of the total number that we think we can get at of saturation in the county? Because like Leo said, there are going to be other customers out there through other providers. We have the RDOF issue that we may or may not get solved. What is the real total number we think we can go after over the course of what's been presented to us today? I know we're shooting for 4,000 at the end of, was that 10-year number, 4,000 or 5-year? I can't remember. What's the total pool we think we can go after if we got 100% saturation?
We don't have any plans to go after that number yet. That would be competing against areas that are served, and depending on who you talk to.
Well, we are looking at going after reconnect numbers in the money here in the very near future, and that would allow us to do that, wouldn't it?
No, we would still be focusing on 25.3 unserved connections. The reconnect allows for, as Doug mentioned, a higher percentage of mix of 120 customers. But we've been very careful to make sure that we're focusing on those DSL customers. That's part of what's taken us so long to put together this application, is that we want to make it as strong as possible and don't want to leave ourselves open to challenges. It's also not hard for the cable companies eventually to up their equipment and reach that speed. Over time, I think there's going to be more options, but at this point, looking at taking on that competition is going to be for another future conversation. There's a lot of opportunities in the denser areas, certainly because we can get more customers and more revenue for less construction costs. But it's going to be more marketing, more effort, and more pushback. So we don't have plans at this point.
So it sounds like we do have an idea, though. Is the 4,000 kind of the max number we think we can get to?
4,000.
With this funding, that's what you can get to. Yes, sir. That completely uses all the cash. Yes, sir.
Yep.
Now, with that said, remember I said, some of those future years might have rate increases. If you did that, maybe you could get 400 more customers. I mean, but those customers are all funded by the revenues. So the answer is that business plan pays for those 4,000 people, right? So.
And then Will got into something else that we haven't really discussed much, and that's the low income factor in all of this. How many of the customers in this current round of grant monies that we have do we figure will qualify as low income customers?
I haven't done those numbers. We can have Jean pull that data anytime. It'll take her a little bit because she's busy, but we can pull that out.
Now, the way that works for the federal money is we still collect just as if what happens is we give a $30 discount to the customer, and then the FCC gives us $30 back.
Yep.
So we still get our rate, but customers will have a really good deal. That's going to be a lot of people because that particular program goes up to 200% of the poverty level. So that's fairly high up. So.
Yes. And Dan, what we were looking at is that, we're really going to want to take a look at what we do for expanding beyond this initial model in the 2026, and maybe as early as 2025 in that range. But I think the landscape is going to be different than it is today. Kevin, do you have opinions on that?
The one thing I will say, and Will and I've had this discussion many times, I do think there is a lot of opportunity associated with existing fiber and fiber that will be installed during the grant. So I'm of the opinion we can get higher than the 4,000 customers easily. And as long as the customers or the construction costs, again, it'll be dependent on what side of the road you're on, will be low enough that we will get quite a few more customers. I would like to see us have over 5,000 customers in 10 years. And I think that's very realistic. And I think that's something we should shoot for. I would like to see us being aggressive and go out and try to connect these customers. I know that's it's a ways off. We have to concentrate and get the things done right now. But in that 2005, 2006 timeframe, I think we are going to see opportunities to really grow the network and then grow revenue. So,
And I would point out again, this is not the end of the grant rounds. There's going to be more grants. So that the 4,000 is where you get with these 5 grant opportunities. Get 1 or 2 more grants, that number obviously goes up. So, yep.
Yeah, and because we're so new to this, I mean, we feel like we're basically starting from scratch as of this spring with the retail and residential net build out. Even though we've got some history, it's in a lot of ways a new business. We've tried to be as conservative as possible. We know the commissioners have been very concerned about making sure that this doesn't have a negative impact on our ratepayers. So all of our models were created to take that in mind. So we do very much want to connect as many people as we can, but we want to keep being mindful of those priorities. I can't see any other raised hands if there are any.
So this presentation, the slides will be available on our website.
After the meeting, it will be on the website. Yep.
Mr. Tiersch, you have your hand up. Can't hear you, Tom.
Tom, we still can't hear you.
How about that? Is that better?
There you are.
Much better.
There I am. Thank you, Commissioner Collins. I wasn't sure if you were taking public comments at this time. Just a couple of things that were said during this presentation that caught my attention. There were several times stated, I think it was Mr. Dawson was saying, well, you can always raise rates. Everybody else is raising rates. You can just raise rates. Well, that may be true, but you're looking at a business which is going to be in an expansion phase. You're going to be adding new customers while supporting basically the same level of overhead. So why would you have to raise rates? Your rates should be actually lower the more customers you get, because you're spreading out the cost of customer service and so on and so forth. I guess I'm just offended by that cavalier statement. Well, you can always just raise rates. I just find that a little bit annoying to view that as a profit-making venture. The PUD is not here to make a profit. The PUD is to provide service and support to its customer owners. So it's a whole different take. This is not AT&T. This is not Wave. This is a PUD, a public utility district. So please keep that in mind when you're thinking about how much revenue you're gonna rake in at the expense of the customers. I did want to ask another more possibly premature question, but in looking at the construction costs for putting this fiber in, there are a lot of areas, such as where I live, where the power cables are old, they're underground, they're aging, and will eventually die, probably sooner than we'd like. It seems like an ideal opportunity to, if you're going to underground the fiber, to go in and fix those old buried power cables at the same time. And I would hope that you'd kind of build that into your construction plan. And yeah, it's not a cost that's directly related to fiber, but it's just like Port Townsend where you tore up the street once and you put everything in. Well, you should probably consider doing the same thing in areas like mine where, private gravel roads and so forth, but with underground power. So sort of a question and a suggestion. Thanks very much.
And Tom, just to reply to that, that's something that Kevin and I have talked about. And we're also doing our meter change out over the next couple of years, and we're looking for all kinds of construction synergies. I don't know what we'll be able to deliver, but we're definitely reviewing those options.
Commissioner Randall?
Yeah, this is a question that's really a little bit off topic for us, but Doug, I'm wondering if you're familiar with how Anacortes is running their fiber. My understanding is they're running it through the city water system, and it's a city municipal owned broadband system and owned water system. So I'm kind of wondering, as we talk about serving other areas that are built out, is there any opportunity for us to look at water systems as a conduit route for fiber?
I'm not familiar with that, but I have a lot of clients who are doing that. In most cases, that turns out to be more expensive, believe it or not. And it all just depends on the age and the quality of the water system. And so, there are places where the pipes are big and there's lots of extra room and they haven't gotten sludgy over the years and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a lot of water systems where that just doesn't work. And so it's a case by case basis. We didn't look at that specifically, but before we do this construction, we have a chance to do that. And most of the places we've ever looked, it turns out to be more expensive. It doesn't seem like it ought to be, but it is. So, and the problem is getting from the water pipes on the street up into the house to give them the broadband. That's actually quite tricky without drilling holes in their water pipes. And that's the actual challenge of it. It's a very interesting way to do it.
Well, that makes sense. And they're also a jurisdiction that's served by Puget Sound Energy. So I don't think they had the option of owning their own poles like we do, but it's really good to hear from you that in general, probably overhead and going on poles is going to be cheaper than working with water systems, but that's what they had. So that's probably why they did it that way.
Yeah. I mean, there's a system back in New York that has just the fattest, cleanest water pipes you've ever seen. For them, it was actually cheaper. That's not normal. So. Yeah.
Commissioner Tupper.
Yeah, so I know we want to look at the positive on this because everybody knows there's a need and that we want to do what we can to help everybody. I'm kind of looking at the CAB questions that were put forward. And one of them is an exit strategy. As we start to hire people, buy equipment, set up the infrastructure and supply the services, what if the numbers don't play out, and the raising the rates thing got brought up, so I won't go there. What is our trigger point at some point that we decide this is not being successful? How do we back down or maintain what we've got at that point moving forward? What is anybody willing to talk about that aspect of it?
I'll talk about that aspect real quick. Dan, I have spent some time and some of these projects that are grant funded, you may be where you only build the grant and then you're done. But as long as we keep the grant costs and everything done, the models that were presented today show they are cash positive for that grant monies. So as we move forward, and a lot of this stuff is going to be tracked quite a bit different than we've tracked things in the past. We will know for grant repayment to get our monies from the grant, we will have much better details. We will have much better information coming back to the board. And I think really it becomes a working relationship between the broadband department and myself and the board, where we look at these things and we say, yeah, these were conservative numbers. We've been doing a little bit better. And so, okay, we can maybe expand more or not. So That's why the models were kind of built in such a way that they are kind of standalone units per how Doug and Will put the program together. So there'll be a lot of opportunity to say, okay, we have done and funded this. We have been successful. Do we continue going on? Now, eventually that gets us right back to where I am today, where we have people overworked, understaffed, and it's a challenge to get to that next level. But there'll be many opportunities in the next couple of years for the board to, if you choose to come back and say, no, we're done here. But they will be self-sufficient per the grants we've received.
And there's a different way to answer that question also. You're creating a valuable asset. Remember the $30 million in equity built up here. The fact is, and I think you guys are in this for 100 years because that's what PUDs do, but you could sell the system in 10 years and get back more money than you put into it. The fact is you're creating a marketable, sellable asset here. It's only sellable when you have customers on it. The actual just raw fiber could not be sold for what you paid for it, but the customer base could be. So, you're not trapped into running this business forever. And it's the same question that every utility gets. How come you aren't selling the whole thing off to a commercial provider? You guys actually pulled it back from a commercial provider, but it is an asset that does have book value. So it's an interesting business model.
So I guess what I'm thinking about is, are we going to see a year by year target number of expected customers? Just like we, year over year, we look at revenues of, past year versus current year. Are we going to set up some targets here once we confirm that we're going to get the grants, right? That asterisk in front of this, that I realize we don't have the grants quite yet. But once we are confirmed a grant, are we going to start clock ticking of, here's the timeline for that project of how we expect to get the customers and how we're going to expend in resources, i.e. how many trucks we have to buy or how many people we need to hire, along with the infrastructure, to make sure we're balancing that as we go and not get too far over the skis? Is that something that we're going to see from staff? Is a running timeline of expectations and targets?
We expect to provide that and have regular reports as we go along, but and that was all built into Doug's model, and that's a graph we can put together, the customer acquisition.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to go from, mine's not really high level anymore, it's medium level, but you're going to go budgetary here very soon. So yeah, there'll be full budgets.
And with our first initial purchase of fiber, it could very well be growing in value by the day. So we'll have to see. We may be.
I think there's one chat, Will.
Street corner. What's that?
I think there's one chat question, maybe two.
Okay. Let me see. From Steve Cords, can the impacts and limitations of speeding up the program be addressed? For example, North Jefferson underserved customers will be waiting around 2 years for improvement. That we expect to get the contract for that grant at the same time as the Quilcene the Gardner grant. It has a longer deadline on when it's got to be finished. So the Quilcene Gardner one has a shorter deadline, so that has to be our priority. But we really want to connect and build everyone as quickly as we safely can. And we're definitely, I'm talking to people every day, and every day they want to know when they can get connected, what they can do, what's the next step. And I'm doing everything I can to make that happen.
And I have a different answer to that too. We've taken the very conservative approach in this model we showed you that we're going to use all the timeline that the grants give us. If you can build them faster, you're going to build them faster and you're going to hook up customers faster. And once you get the construction underway and see how it's going, if you can build all those a year or two sooner, you will. And so the grants allow you to build faster. They just don't allow you to build slower. So, we're building, what is it, 400 miles of fiber? It may turn out that can be done, 18 months faster than, we don't know until you really get a contractor up here and find out what the construction issues are. But the goal would always to go as fast as possible.
And I'm stuck in my role as both cheerleader and wet blanket, so I apologize. I'm always trying to making sure we stay within our bounds of our projects. I don't see any other hands, and there was no other, I didn't see any other chats and chat questions. Let me look back. Oh, nope, just a apology for not being muted. So that's all we've got today. And then I've got another bid for fiber I want to go over with the board. Any more questions for Doug while we have them, especially members of the public? Ken, I don't know if you want to open it up. I know we had a bunch.
Well, I think the public has been participating. We haven't limited questions. So I think we can move forward. And I want to thank Doug Dawson for his availability this morning. Well, I guess it's not morning where you are, Doug, anymore.
No, it's not.
But this has been very, very helpful. I appreciate all of the work that has been done from PUD staff and Doug and his associates in putting this together. It's very encouraging, it's exciting, and fingers crossed the grant money will come through and we will be, I think, a much richer community in several senses as a result. So let's move forward and look at the fiber bids.
Okay.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.
Right. Well, thank you all very much. And of course, if you have any more questions, you know how to get to me. So talk to you later.
Thanks so much, Doug, for being a part of what we're trying to do. We really appreciate your work.
You bet. I love what you guys are doing. So it's a pleasure.
Thanks, Doug.
Talk
Thank
to you
you,
later.
Doug.
Bye.
So just give me a moment to bring up the tabulation so we can look at that. And, you know, I didn't mention how much work Mike Bailey and Gene and Scott and so many other members of our team. Sam has helped me out with engineering, and Alex, our GIS specialist, has just been essential. So it's been, you know, it's been a PUD-wide effort, and so many of us are putting in the effort beyond the bounds of our normal job description, which is challenging at times. But this is a one, you know, as others have said, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to make a real difference in our community. So I think it's worth it. And I really appreciate the support the commission has provided. And let me share the tabulation. It looks like there's a hand up or a chat. Oh, thanks from
Yeah, there is.
just a thank you from Steve. Thank you, Steve. Okay, so we put out an RFP for another round of fiber material orders. That RFP closed on April 20th. We received 6 bids, including 2 bids that were, 2 agencies that gave 2 separate bids. In this bid, we did not have to take the entire package. We could kind of pick and choose. And we could also, it didn't have to be lowest bidder. It also could be the deliverable times could be a factor as well as others. So we went through the bids, and these are the 2 that we would like to select and move forward with. And this would again be to have materials on hand to begin construction. Now, for our first order, our first bid, for our first purchase, we were well within the rules of the NTIA grant, and we for purchase pre-grant award. We are now with the NTIA grant and with the Public Works Board grant. The clock has already begun ticking. We can accrue expenses. We have been a little cautious about accruing expenses because we don't have a contract. But we do want to move forward with a second round of fiber material purchase and getting our first order of drop fiber and hand holes, again, so that we can build out as quickly as possible once we have those contracts in hand. Kevin, you want to say anything more?
We have held off on bringing this to the commission, hoping to bring it to the commission hand in hand with a signed grant contract. We can't do that. What we're hoping to do here is get authorization to go. These were due, I think, by the end of the week, which is tomorrow. We would call and negotiate, say, hey, we are gonna go your direction, but we need some additional time to sign the contract. That said, they may come back and say no. So we would like permission to move this forward, but cautiously, see what we can work through with the vendors. It sounds like a huge fiber bid. We're going to buy $1 million worth of fiber. Right now, everybody's buying $1 million worth of fiber. So I'm not sure if they're going to be willing to work with us a little bit, but that would be our approach. We would ask for a little bit of time to see if we could get a signed contract. If we can't, then we'll probably move forward with the fiber purchase if the board is agreeable.
Questions? Commissioner Tupper.
So what percentage of our overall projects at the current level of grants we have does this cover? I mean, what percent, is this 10% of what we're going to need overall, or where are we at for how much of the equipment we're going to need does this match with?
Will, I don't have exact estimates. If you do, great. Otherwise, I can give the information we started with on the NTIA grant.
No, we're going to be purchasing a total of $25 million of fiber. So this would only be up to $2 million. So we'll still be purchasing a lot more.
And looking at the return time, some of it's fairly quick, really, under current circumstances. So is this something, if we found out that we weren't going to get the monies we were going to need, that we could resell, and for lack of a better term, to other utilities, or so that we're not stuck? I mean, is that an option as well, that we'd be able to deal this stuff off if we weren't able to utilize it?
Probably, Dan. I know others are purchasing fiber as quickly as we are. If we had it in stock, I do know it would be able to resell. Probably wouldn't be able to get additional funds for it, but we could get our money back if we needed to.
Other questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to authorize the staff to accept the fiber optic material bid from Wesco Annixter and Graybar.
So moved.
I'll second. Questions or further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion has been made and seconded. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 The motion has been passed. So that brings us to the end of our agenda for this meeting. Are there any last minute comments? Thank you all very much for your participation this morning. Very informative, an important meeting. So again, thanks very much for being part of this, and have a good day. See you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good
Great
day.
job,
Have a good
Will.
day.
Thank you.